Welcome back to Coffee and Candor. This is Ross,
Brandy,
Amber,
and Chris.
Today we're going to get into a subject that is probably going to take more than an episode or two to talk about.
We're not scared.
It's the West Memphis 3, which is a fairly famous case out of Arkansas.
I think it's very famous.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So let's start talking about it then.
All right, so the West Memphis 3, it was, oh God, somebody Googled
early
when.
90s.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when.
94, 95?
93. And it was, West Memphis is right on the edge of the border between Arkansas and Tennessee.
It's on the west side of Memphis, right? It's just right across the border from Memphis.
Yeah. Literally right across the Mississippi River.
Okay.
And there was a neighborhood, the Robin Hills, I believe,
something like that. Yeah.
Subdivision, and these three little boys went out to play one afternoon after school and didn't come home. And
how old were the boys?
8.
Yeah, 8-ish.
So young.
Yeah, little guys. They were little guys. And somebody Google it. I don't want to mess up their names.
Christopher Mark Byers.
Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers.
Yeah.
All right, let's try that where we're not talking over each other.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers.
Okay.
And they were little friends in this subdivision. And so they didn't come home, and they started looking for them. And later that night or the next day, they found them, and they
we don't have to get into the details of how the condition of their bodies, because it was atrocious.
I have no interest in that. I wasn't going there.
Okay.
But they were found murdered and
badly murdered.
They had been tied and murdered, and
Found in a creek.
Yeah, West Memphis had kind of popped up along I-40.
Yeah.
And so the neighborhood was not far from the freeway.
Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, you can see the subdivision from the freeway.
Okay.
So immediately, this was huge. Things like this just didn't happen, especially in Arkansas back then. It immediately became just terrifying. I remember, we had little boys.
Mm-hmm.
Our kids were just little guys when this happened, and I remember just being terrified, and it was all that was on the news, and they were just so... There was just this outrage that somebody would hurt these kids, and immediately there was all this call for justice, and then we didn't get justice. We just got...
Okay, so tell everybody about how the case actually went, because there was a lot of bullshit that was going on that went on.
There's no really easy way to go into how the case went and how it went awry. Basically, these 3 boys, teenage boys then, from the area were accused, and I think they were determined that they were going to be guilty from the minute their names were...
How did the sheriff... Because it was the sheriff, right? It wasn't the...
No, it was West Memphis Police. West Memphis Police Chief.
So how did the West Memphis Police Chief get these boys' names?
And
the boys are Damian Eccles, Jesse Miss Kelly, and who's the third one?
Jason Baldwin.
Jason Baldwin.
They got their names from a variety of reasons, but Damien was just kind of
they were going around questioning school officials, people in the neighborhood, that kind of thing. Damien's name kept popping up because he was different. Well, he wore black,
and
he listened to heavy metal music, and so they started looking at them because they were...
That automatically makes someone...
No, it doesn't.
You have to understand that this was in the middle of
in the
Bible
satanic
Belt.
Panic that happened in the 90s in the Bible Belt, and so it absolutely did make a difference,
and that's why they originally started, because he was different. Mm-hmm. He was different, so they started looking at him.
And Jason was actually like a straight A student, really smart kid.
Well, and they weren't really... they knew each other from school, but it wasn't like...
Jason and Damien were best friends. They really didn't know Miss Kelly. He was like somebody they knew, but they weren't like friends.
The 3 little boys were all 8.
All 8, okay.
And so, right there, that should have been kind of a dead giveaway that maybe what they're being told is not entirely accurate. Because now I've never been involved in anything like this, but I can't imagine me and my buddy finding some random dude and saying, "Hey, you want to go fucking kill some kids with us?"
Yeah,
you know, I mean that doesn't seem like something that would happen.
Well, and Jesse Miss Kelly, he had mental defects. They said he had like the maturity of about
the mentality of like a 5-year-old.
Yeah, and he's, they held him, and he confessed.
And he didn't have Down syndrome. He was just mentally developmentally disabled.
Yeah, yeah. And it was, it was a known thing that he was developmentally disabled.
And was it not the case that their entire hearing pretty much hinged on his testimony? Is that accurate?
I mean, they had some physical evidence that was sort of manufactured, like a knife that was not the knife. They just found a knife when they were
found
going through Damien's room. But right. Yeah, I mean
because I mean, who doesn't have a knife?
I've got several, and I was a girl.
Yeah. I mean, there's one right there on that thing.
Yeah, I mean, Damien and Jason never admitted any wrongdoing, and they were vocally that they didn't do anything, that they were innocent, and they did have Jesse's confession,
which should have been stricken because, number one, he doesn't have the mental capacity to make a confession.
Yeah, they didn't care.
And he'd been held for hours and hours and hours.
What, like 16 hours they had grilled him?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he would have said anything.
And here's the thing. I mean, if he truly has the mentality of a 5 or 6 year old, our grandson is 3. You could be talking to him asking about how his day went. And he'll have heard things in other conversations and somehow add that into, so
right,
you don't think you're being interrogated by someone who supposedly has experience interrogating people.
Yeah, and I mean, they keep repeating the same things over and over and over. And after, 16, 17 hours, he didn't have food. He didn't have, these normal things. And that was the primary thing for their case.
Yes.
Well, and again, when you have someone with the mentality of a young child, they want to please.
Right.
They very much want you to be proud of them, and they want you. So
well, and at a certain point, you just want to say whatever they want to hear
to get out of that
hell
damn
out of
room.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So apparently, there was a girl who, when the police were going around questioning because they thought, this was done by some satanic cult. They had talked to one girl who knew Miss Kelly, and she remembered Miss Kelly telling her about Eccles, his friend who drank blood and stuff. And so that's how
she ended up recanting, though.
All of
she
it.
admitted she lied later.
Oh yeah, a lot of people lied.
So
everybody was caught up in wanting to.
Anyway, they started into this investigation, and like I said, because he was different. All the people in and around town, the like I said, school officials, etc., brought up Damien's name because he was different.
Right. He is what now is known as goth or emo.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay.
He dressed in black, wore a trench coat. We've all. And like Brandy said at the time, the satanic panic that everything was a satanic cult doing this, and and they just kind of bought into that and went and ran with it.
Yeah, and a lot of people, and I don't know if that was a nationwide thing, but
it was all over.
I distinctly remember it here. What I mean is I don't know if it was a nationwide thing or if it was just the Bible Belt.
No, there were reports all over. I remember there were some daycares that were supposedly, stuff happened, and it turns out, there was nothing, but they were kids used in rituals and all this shit. I mean, it was popping up everywhere. It was all over, like things like Dateline and 2020. It was just like the big,
the media definitely precipitated, hyped up this thing that might not have even been a thing.
But
don't get me wrong, the person that did this is certainly evil, but
but it had nothing
being
to do
a
with cult.
satanic ritual or something.
Yeah.
No. But the thing was, during the course of the investigation and everything, it didn't help because they had, during the court case, there was an expert that was called in. Well, that expert was trying to push his whole narrative that all this satanic worship was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And
an expert on what? Satanism?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But then, they originally said that there were marks of ritual abuse on the bodies, which turned out to be animal predation because they were found in a creek.
So
and they'd been there,
and animals had started feeding on them.
Yeah, they'd been there over because they originally said that one of the boys
had a human bite.
And like his scrotum. And it was actually that,
animals going after soft tissue.
Yeah, I mean that's the soft bits are what they go for first.
Yeah.
But definitely the boys. Because they were found hogtied. They were. Definitely abused and tortured. But there were no ritual signs of anything. That was all animal predation. And
so let's talk about how they were shanghaied in the court, because you three know a whole lot more about this than I do. But I do know this: their trial and subsequent retrials that was a kangaroo court. They didn't get a jury of their peers.
No.
They didn't have.
Okay, you had asked about like what their records had been. It said Baldwin and Eccles had both been arrested for vandalism and shoplifting.
Oh yeah, it was just
just
teenage
stuff.
Yes, goofy kid stuff. Miss Kelly was known to have a temper and had done fist fights. Miss Kelly and Eccles had already dropped out of school. Baldwin was a great student. He had a talent for drawing and sketching. He intended to go to graphic design school. And so, these weren't like bad mega criminal. They were just teenage boys in a small town getting into teenage boy trouble.
Yeah.
They hadn't done anything. Eccles' family was really poor. He was on the radar of the social workers because, they were really poor. And
and that whole area is in the Arkansas Delta.
Right.
And
there's nothing in the Delta.
There's not a lot of industry there. It's farms. It's, and so that whole area is depressed financially. And,
There's not a lot of industry. There's not a lot to do. Poverty is rampant.
Yeah, all you have to do is fucking get into trouble. That's pretty much it.
And I think at the time that's exactly what he was doing. His girlfriend was pregnant when they were arrested. He had already been done some inpatient behavioral health stuff where he'd gotten a diagnosis of major depression. And, so and I think this
which also could be a byproduct of living in such a depressed area.
Absolutely.
Because you see that a lot in Alaska too.
Yeah.
That and, being different in the way he dressed, the way he
didn't
talked.
fit in,
He didn't fit in, so that alienated him even more from the population. We were led to believe when they were arrested these were like super bad kids. But this was some evil,
They were just garden variety kids in a small town with nothing to do. So I think it's important that we dispel that. These were not criminals; they were just kids.
Kids. They probably were arrested for throwing snowballs at cars and crap
just
like that.
Bullshit stuff.
No, they weren't perfect, but they weren't, criminals.
Right. And the one cop had crossed, because of like truancy and things like that, he had crossed paths with Eccles.
Truancy, skipping school.
Yeah, yes. But that had put him on the original cop's radar. And so when people were saying, "Oh, well, I heard this guy drinks blood and he does this and he does that,"
But he skipped school, and that's the line.
Well, and I think he'd been like disrespectful with him. Imagine that.
I can't imagine a disrespectful teenager.
Never. And so he had.
I dare say they don't exist.
Not in my world, but yeah.
Yeah,
So
because your kids are over 18.
But I mean, he had kind of